Hello, and welcome to the Bigger Than Us podcast. I'm your host, Raj Daniels, and today I'd like to welcome Walter McLeod to the show. Walter McLeod is a co founder and managing director with VSF Solar, LLC, where he leads project origination, site control, government relations, acquisitions, legal, utility relations, and business negotiations. He has more than 20 years' experience in energy policy and solar development. He also publishes a weekly newsletter called Carbon Creed. Walter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Raj.
Walter, thank you for being on. Walter, where in the world are you?
Well, presently, I'm in Fredericksburg, Virginia, working from my home office.
And how's the weather there?
It's actually not too bad. It's a little nippy for mid-April, but the sun is out, and when the sun is shining, it's always a good day.
Are you getting the opportunity to walk around a little bit, get some air?
Yeah. My wife has me on this regiment that I have to, go for this 3 mile trudge with her every evening through the neighborhoods. We live in it's a fairly historic town, so we go through, Confederate and Revolutionary War cemeteries and houses that are 300 years old, and it's pretty interesting. But it gets me exercised, and that's the point.
Well, good. And how are you doing right now during the whole pandemic?
Doing pretty well, thank goodness. Trying to stay focused on big picture issues, family, health, and staying mentally and emotionally well, and continuing to to focus on the work that I do right now on carbon and climate, uh, so that I don't get distracted by so much misery that there is on television right now.
I'm glad to hear that. So, Walter, I like to open the show by asking my guest the following question. If you were asked to share something interesting about yourself, what would it be?
Well, I think it's funny you asked that question. Most people do not know that I spent some of my career working in the coastal conservation space, and I actually wrote legislation that became a national resolution that was passed by unanimous consent in the House and the Senate, and about 150 governors and mayors and the White House endorsed it. So that's something that most people don't know about me.
That is interesting. What kind of legislation?
It was a resolution establishing a coastal creed for beaches and coastal communities around water quality and litter.
Water quality in the community?
Water quality, coastal water quality, so bathing water quality, bacterial standards, and litter, plastic waste, and debris.
That is really interesting. And how long ago was this?
Let's see, it passed in 2007. The 110th Congress passed it.
Congrat- Congratulations for getting something passed.
Yeah, that was that was a when I used to do public policy full time. That was the highlight of my career.
So, speaking of your career, can you share a little bit about your current endeavor?
Sure. So currently, I'm splitting my time between two aligned focuses. One, my partner Bruce Beam and I formed a company called VSF Solar, where we are developers and financiers and consultants of utility scale solar projects, primarily in the Mid Atlantic and Southeastern United States. And then the other part of my time I spend working on a newsletter that I created. It's called Carbon Creed, and there we focus on looking at corporate leadership, public policy, and consumer technology through a climate lens.
So, how long have you been publishing a newsletter?
I actually started that in November, and uh, it's a weekly newsletter. It's curated, and it's been a way for me to flex my creative muscle and all this information and knowledge I've had for the years to sort of put it out with my special sort of viewpoint the good, the bad, and the ugly. And people are giving me pretty good response. I'm happy I'm doing it.
I like the idea of flexing a creative muscle. This morning I saw a sign. It said, less hustle, more art.
Oh, I love that one. Yes. Yeah. This is all about art for me. Yeah.
And I think right now, we all have the opportunity to get involved in more art. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's been an amazing outlet and a way to connect with my colleagues and friends over the years, uh, using a platform and a mechanism I just had never I didn't realize was out there, and it's really powerful.
That's excellent. So, Walter, you've been involved in this clean tech industry for many, many years. What are some of the changes that you've seen over your time?
Well, it's interesting you asked that. The definition of clean tech has changed dramatically during the course of the past 10 to 12 years. Back in the mid to early 2000 um, time frame, clean tech was pretty much renewable technology, and there were some people who were trying to push the envelope and include low carbon technologies like natural gas technologies in the clean tech space. Now, of course, today we know that that's certainly not correct, and that natural gas, while it may be a transition as we go to cleaner technologies, it in itself should not be considered clean tech. And then we also see some changes in sort of in the narrative around how we describe, technology in this context. Today, you see funds that are focused on climate technology and not just what we call clean tech. So they're looking at things like decarbonization as a focus, and that can include sequestration. It can include um, other sort of non-traditional technological approaches, uh, and it goes much broader than just renewable energy technologies that we have been accustomed to.
So, do you have any favorite technologies besides solar that you've seen over your time?
I have become a lover of electric transportation and the applications in that space, and I'll tell you why. When I looked at the opportunities we have to advance the low carbon economy and to decarbonize our way of lives, um, utility scale renewable technologies, um, uh, as well as local community scale and residential scale uh, solar and other technologies of that type. Um, they have more of an infrastructure feel to them, and they tend to be more limited because not everybody has their own home, so not everyone can avail themselves of rooftop solar, let alone community solar. And so when I look at electric transportation, all of us, especially in this country, but globally, we all are on the move. And every day we make mobility decisions, whether it's, to ride a bike or to walk down the street or to jump in our individual car or to ride, or mass transportation or today to, use a ride hailing app. And so I think that as we look at the increasing electrification of mobility options, you're going to see opportunities for more people to directly participate in decarbonization and clean technology solutions than you do have in more of an infrastructure focus like renewable technologies, which if you live in an apartment, for example, or you may not have the option to go solar.
So, what are some of your thoughts around, the vehicle to grid opportunities?
Well, vehicle to grid is a really dynamic and changing space. I a couple of years ago, working with George Mason University here in Virginia, I got the privilege to lead a consortium of companies in the electrification space, and part of what we produced from that consortium was a set of guiding principles around electrified mobility. And one of the areas we focused on, in addition to mobility as a service and transportation as a service and elect, um, uh, environmental justice, was vehicle to grid risk, vehicle to grid business opportunities, and vehicle to grid modeling. Because there are lots of business opportunities that are going to come from this whole new sector as cars not only serve as modes of transportation, but with electric batteries, cars can also power our homes and power our essential appliances. I think the way to think about electric vehicles is that they are almost a generation source in themselves, and they are going to be they're commonly being viewed as a grid resource. Instead of it being um, a unilateral exchange where the battery and the car benefit only from plugging into the grid and grid operators now have a resource that they'll be able to tap and utilize to provide backup and power on demand for other things. So it's just going to change the whole technicality around the grid and opportunities to use the grid in a more dynamic way.
So, what's interesting is that a couple of days ago, my wife showed me an article. They have deployed 110 school buses in Austin to provide internet for children that are currently at home. There are certain areas that are having challenges with broadband. And when she told me about that, I thought about some of the opportunities regarding vehicle to grid when it comes to, things like school buses and other transportation.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. So the electric vehicle and electric vehicles are part of what most people will consider a continuing of advanced mobility. So you get electrification, you're going to have autonomy, and you also have connectivity. Connectivity is what you're talking about, where an electric vehicle can serve almost like an internet provider of sorts, depending on how it's constructed. But what vehicles are able to do and how they are viewed as an asset as opposed to a liability is going to change the whole value proposition of mobility and how we use what we call a car. They're going to be more like robots.
I totally agree. And speaking of value proposition, the crux of our conversation is the why behind, what you do. And pun intended, what drives you. You there's an opportunity cost for you to be involved in this sector. You've been in it for many years, you've stayed in it. What's your why? What drives you?
That question is one I ponder every day. And with good reason, because I think it's important to always reevaluate why you're doing whatever you're doing, what drives you. So I'm a chemist by training. That's my background. And, chemists tend to be uh, driven by the arts or the science of chemistry, right? And a traditional chemistry training is found in the arts and science realm. And I believe that that's true for me today. As I look at my why and why I've been driven to clean technology and this particular aspect of it around clean generation and mobility. It's because I love the art of business and the art of the deal. And I love the scientific process and the combination of science and technology. So it has always been a part of what's fascinated me since I was a kid. I've always tinkered with technology. I've always been sort of attracted to and had an affinity for technology, but I've also always been drawn to the arts. I played the double bass going through high school and middle school, and it was kind of funny because I was 6'3", I was captain of the basketball team, and I played in the orchestra. Now that was definitely a breaking of the mold. Okay. Um, but it was because I just always had an appreciation for the arts, and that remains with me to this very day, and it's just evolved i- into as I become an entrepreneur and do more deals and go through the whole process of creating companies and building teams and partnerships. The art of the deal is just um, it's a real adrenaline boost. It drives me. It's my why.
So, as much as I appreciate your answer, as an interviewer, I have to dig a little bit deeper. You mentioned art and science and the art of the deal. There are numerous different industries as a chemist that you could be involved in. What made you choose clean tech or solar in particular?
I think it, it's happened chance that I ended up in this space. So I started my career as an AP chemistry teacher, and then a friend of mine who was working in public policy in Washington said, hey, you've got a real knack for relationships and understanding how to sell an idea. And in Washington, that's really what people do for a living. They know how to create ideas, package it, and sell that. And so so the next thing I knew, I was working in Washington on public policy in the chemical industry, and then that quickly sort of once I realized that my personal ethics were more focused towards sustainability, I started gravitating towards um, solutions that would get us to sustainability. And what the common theme I saw across all industries was energy. Every industry in this country and the backbone of our society is based upon a functioning energy infrastructure. And for some of us, that's the grid, right? The grid is probably the primary functioning infrastructure today, especially living in the information age we live in now. So I just use that as my magnet, knowing sort of what I was drawn to, and then my career choices um, followed a path, and opportunities were opened before me that led me deeper and deeper into the clean tech sector. Working, with investor organizations and investor groups, becoming an angel investor myself, um, working with big, hedge funds and Fortune 500 companies, and sort of, having an opportunity to create, or use my lens to help them see a decarbonized future the way that I could see it. And so, I've just been fortunate and a bit serendipitous in my path, getting me to, where I am in the clean tech business today.
Well, serendipity is one of my favorite words, but I don't want to gloss over something you said that I think is extremely important. You said about everything is driven or underpinned by energy, and I agree with you. It is. I read the book by Daniel Yergin called The Prize about 8, 10 years ago, and I must have given away, I don't know, 8, 10 copies since then. It's quite a thick book. It's about a 700 page 800 page read. I think it's a phenomenal read, and I almost feel like learning about energy, the grid, and fossil fuels should be part of almost mandatory curriculum because, as you said, it underpins everything we do. Yet most people are either illiterate or ignorant about where the energy comes from. We're all consumers of it, but we don't know what it takes to get here. And so, I'd like to hear some of your thoughts regarding that.
You know, Daniel Jorgen has is one of my favorite authors, and his book, The Prize, is among the top 10 energy books that I recommend and that I have ever had the privilege to read. Um, if you really want, just as you said, if you really want to understand um, global geopolitics today, um, just look at the history of energy, and you'll see that they chart almost a symbiotic path, and I believe that that is not a coincidence. Um, you know, humans, um, Homo sapiens, our societies, the more advanced we become, the more energy integrated we are. and we become much more, and to do this in a decarbonized way, um, we become much more electrified as well. So I believe that as we fully develop and move to sort of the next advanced level of society, there's no question that we're going to have energy and electricity and electrification specifically as an underpinning theme of how that new society is developed and shaped. Now, I don't believe it's going to look like the energy infrastructure model we have today. I think that there's a lot of technological innovation out there that's really good. That's going to influence it. Hydrogen's huge, and I don't think we've really scratched the surface on that. I think there's a place for liquid fuels as well, advanced liquid fuels. And I'm not just talking about biofuels, but maybe that there's a breakthrough there. And there's a place for nuclear, small modular nuclear as well. But it's going to be driven by energy and electrification, and uh, and technologies are going to be developed to enhance and take advantage of a smarter grid structure than what we have today. So we won't see, people are going to laugh when they look at the pictures of telephone poles and electric, the distribution electrical systems we have that utilities use today. And I think even the transmission grid that we have today is going to change substantially as we become more effective and more advanced in learning about how electrons really work. And things like induction become part of our vernacular. So we're on the cusp of it. Usually these kinds of leaps happen, I think, in quantum stages. And when it comes to electricity, we've been at the same level for at least 100 years, just over 100 years. So we're ready for a quantum leap in this space. And I think we're on the verge of that.
Couldn't agree more. So, what are a couple of things that you've learned along the way, a couple of aha moments that you've had that you can share?
Um, so I think aha moments for me um, have been um, the the real sort of amazingly rapid adoption um, of clean energy and decarbonization of the grid that happened faster than I ever thought it would happen. Um, it was just a few years ago during the last year of the Biden Obama administration that we were still talking about natural gas as a transition, bridge fuel. And here we are 4 years later, and I mean, with the advent of batteries, the dramatic drop in the costs of lithium ion battery technology and the new battery technologies that are coming online, you know, it is an amazing aha event, and it will potentially hasten the transition to a zero carbon grid or a decarbonized grid much faster than I think anybody had anticipated. And when that happens too, it will create parity for the internal combustion engine with electric vehicles. Once the battery problem is solved, and I think we're very close there too. So certainly the OEMs are transitioning all their fleets over so that they can take advantage of this. I think that business is going to change dramatically. We talked about that earlier. I think the players in that space are going to change dramatically as well. And I think the business model, especially the business model that we currently have, where you spend 30 or 40 or $50,000 buying a car that depreciates over the course of the next 3 to 4 years, is going to change because the utility of what we currently call a vehicle uh, it will have a different value proposition. As I said, it'll potentially be what will be created will be a grid asset. And so all of those things for me are sort of we're in a sort of a stretch of aha moments as we transition very fast to a decarbonized grid and a decarbonized future.
I appreciate you sharing that. Walter, the last question I have is if you could share some advice or words of wisdom with the audience, what would it be?
Well, I tell you, the advice, the best advice that I got that I have actually used is when it comes to whatever you believe you're supposed to be doing with your life um, professionally, okay, um, you should make a conscious decision to go deep on that. Don't go wide. And what I mean by that is um, there's so much information today. There- there's so many distractions today that you can. It's easy to spread yourself uh, uh, too broadly. Like for example, I mentioned that I'm flexing my artistic muscle by creating a newsletter. Well, there were immediately. I used to have uh, a person who handled my media for me back when I read when I did the coastal create, and she said to me, she said, "Well, you might want to think about adding a podcast, and you might want to think about adding a blog, and you might want to think about adding and that's fine. And you might want to think about getting more visibility using all the social media platforms and setting up a schedule to do that, and that's fine. But I have found that if I pick one social platform that I really focus on, for me that's LinkedIn because I have real conversations with real people. I'm still active on Twitter, but when I want to really hear what people have to say, um, LinkedIn has been my go-to. Um, I, I find that instead of trying to be all things to all people when it comes to decarbonization, in other words, trying to um, be the enviro guy as well as the clean tech guy, as well as the advocate and the activist. I just need to be who I am, and I happen to be a clean tech entrepreneur who's had the fortunate life of being successful at doing public policy and starting businesses and helping to shape how an industry thinks, and that has a lot to do with just timing and being in the right place at the right time, and some of the people I've had the fortune to know. But you want to go deep, and so people when they know me, they know what lane I'm in. They know that if they come to me, I'm a fair and even broker. I can help them. I'm willing to help most people who are willing to help themselves. But I go deep with people, and I go deep with the things that I focus on, and I don't try to spread myself too thin. And then I find that I'm much more successful, and I'm able to scale what I do so much more efficiently because I'm singly focused on accomplishing, achieving a goal. And I think that that's what people need to, as they mature and sort of figure out what it is that they really I know it's overused. They're passionate about, but more importantly, what they what comes to them. I mean, this what I'm doing, it comes to me just like walking. I mean, this this is not something I work at it to be good at it, but it feels natural to me, and that's I think important to go deep, don't go wide when it comes to what you decide to do, your topic, focus, your why, and the people that you spend time with.
I really appreciate you sharing that. Before we go, is there anything we have not explored that you'd like to talk about or share?
Well, I think that you and I had talked a little bit about um, uh, the diversity issue in this space, and I think that even though my expertise is not diversity and inclusion, I live, eat, and breathe and represent diversity and inclusion because I'm a minority entrepreneur, and and this is something I experience all the time. And I just think that as we go down this path and chart this course of what our new economy, our new global economy is going to look like, our new economy here in the U.S. is going to look like, we have to be conscious and consciously make the effort to broaden the types of people that are part of that discussion, so that what we end up with and what we create is truly sustainable, that it truly benefits everyone, and that it has the potential to improve everyone's lives. Because that's what it's really, I think, all about in terms of us as human beings. We need to continue to evolve and continue to improve and advance who we are as a species.
And I really appreciate you sharing that. One of the goals of this podcast is to, you know, shed a spotlight on individuals from all walks of life that are working towards, building a better planet, doing this together, minorities, women, I just feel like, to your point, the more diversity we can bring to the table, the better we'll all be in the future.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Walter, for your time, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
This was great. Thank you for having me, Raj.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. And if you like what you heard, please give us a rating and review at Apple Podcast. Bigger Than Us is a Nexus PMG production. And if you want to show your support and help us grow, please share with a friend or reach out to us on social media, where you'll find us under our Nexus PMG handle.